Hello and welcome to CounterPunch Radio. My name is Eric Draitser. Thanks so much for tuning in, coming back to the show. First-time listeners finding the show, welcome aboard. Always happy to have you. Please do check out CounterPunch Plus. That's how you support CounterPunch. That's how you keep the lights on. That's how you get access to a ton of exclusive content. There are great columns in there. All of the things that used to be in the print magazine are there. Exclusive articles from some of our best-known and not-so-well-known contributors. There is really, really top-notch, excellent stuff in the CounterPunch Plus section. Please get your subscription, get access to that, tell your friends. CounterPunch has been around for years and years. We plan to be around for a lot more years, and of course we do depend on your support. Please do consider that. Give it as a gift. Give it as a gift to yourself, whatever you got to do. So, okay, I want to take this week's little time slot for our episode, and I want to dedicate it to an individual who I have a great amount of respect and admiration for. He just passed away a couple of days ago, I believe. We just got the news yesterday. I'm recording on June 28th. The passing at the age of 91 of the great former Senator Mike Gravel. I consider Mike a friend. I chatted with him a number of times. He was always so sweet to me, always just the nicest, most generous person, and really understood the world and really understood America and understood how the empire came to be, how it exerted its influence, and how we had to wrest control away from the ruling class. This is somebody who served in Congress for, I believe, 12 years, I believe, and he really was unlike anybody I'd ever met. I remember the first time that I spoke to him, I was just blown away by talking to the man who absolutely eviscerated Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Joe Biden on stage during the Democratic debates in 2008. I was already in my early 20s. I was very much anti-Obama, anti-Clinton, very much kind of on the radical left already at that point. Had very little hope that anything of use ever would come out of a Democratic debate. And here comes this grandpa to absolutely light a fire and totally and completely undermine, discredit, and absolutely eviscerate every major candidate on the stage, including the man who would go on to be president, Barack Obama. Mike Gravel had principles. Mike Gravel stood for peace. He stood for justice. He was a great guy. No matter what anybody might say about him, no matter his kookiness or any of that other stuff that people want to trot out there, this was the real deal. Here was a real guy who understood what it is that we're all fighting for. So with that, I'm going to take this week's episode and dedicate it to Mike Gravel and, of course, to his family, to his children, grandchildren, everybody else that knew him and loved him. You're about to listen to about a 12-minute excerpt of my interview with Mike Gravel in March of 2013. Interestingly, I chatted with Mike for the first time on one of my old podcasts in about, I think it was about 48 hours after the death of Hugo Chavez. So this was really kind of a momentous turning point in our recent history, especially for those of us who call ourselves socialists and anti-imperialists and the like. And I was lucky enough to be able to sit down with Mike Gravel to talk about it, to talk about Hugo Chavez, to talk about his legacy, U.S. imperialism in Latin America. This was only about 10 minutes or so of our conversation. This is now, I guess, officially a lost episode in my oeuvre because I don't know where the rest of the interview is. But I do have the first 10 minutes, and so do enjoy that. And at some point, if I can find the rest of this lost episode on one of my old hard drives or something, maybe I will be able to republish that. But without further ado, my interview with Mike Gravel in March of 2013, following the death of Hugo Chavez. Rest in peace to Mike. Enjoy. My name is Eric Draitser, and although I say it when I introduce my guests quite often, it truly is an honor and a privilege to have the conversation that I'm about to have with former Senator Mike Gravel. I'm sure many of you know Senator Gravel either from his campaign for president in 2008 for his historic contributions to truth and transparency with the Pentagon Papers in the late 60s, early 70s. However you may know him, I'm sure you are a fan. So with all of that being said, Mike Gravel, welcome to The Reality Principle.
Thank you for having me, Eric. And it may be an honor for you, but it's a pleasure for me because I know your thinking and your work, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I have so many things that I want to cover, but I suppose we really have to lead off with the breaking news that really has come across the news wires in the last hour or so. That is the sad news of President Chavez's death down in Venezuela. So let's just begin with that point. I want to get your take on Hugo Chavez, his death, and what it means for Venezuela and for the world.
Well, I think it's going to be quite an impact on the political community of Venezuela, since he was so popular, and he was really such an unusual leader. And you may recall that at one point the United States tried to overthrow him through the CIA on a weekend, which did not succeed, and his popularity became ever stronger. He's used very much of a socialist approach to the assets of the community that would benefit individual citizens. For that, he's loved. He really, really did care about ordinary people. Now, will that change with a new president? That remains to be seen. But I think that from a noteworthy point of view, he was a global leader in the real sense of the word, and brought about the independence of Venezuela from the United States control or influence. He was just an unusual leader, and he is much loved within Venezuela, though he's reviled in some quarters of the American leadership.
You know, I think that you're touching on something very important, and it is about how other people, particularly poor and working class people, view President Chavez. And I think the further point that we should make, or that we should sort of illustrate, is the fact that Chavez is not merely a singular figure. Chavez is symbolic of a much larger trend throughout Latin America, something that we see in Ecuador with President Correa, or in Bolivia with Morales, or in Nicaragua or elsewhere. He represents this trend not just towards socialism, but an anti-imperialist posture, one that looks at Latin America as actually an independent region, not simply the backyard of the United States.
That's quite correct. And when you say anti-imperialist, when I was referring to socialist, I wasn't referring to socialism in the conventional classic sense. It was a statement to underscore the fact that resources of the country in question were primarily at the disposal and for the benefit of the people of that country, whether in Venezuela or in other parts of the world. That, of course, flies in the face of unbridled capitalism, and that's where he was sort of a bête noire to the American leadership. But keep in mind, all during this conflict that we had with Chavez, Venezuela was the second largest exporter of oil to the United States. So it didn't impair the economic structure that had been brought about, but it did impair any political alignment with the American leadership.
That's right. You know, there's a phrase that I have no idea whether I actually made it up or whether I subconsciously stole it from somebody else. But, you know, I always, in thinking about Chavez or Morales or Correa or any of them, I think of the phrase that I think to some degree was their mantra, and that is that natural resources are national resources. These are not simply resources to be exploited for the profits of multinational corporations, that they actually belong to the people and should serve the interests of the people. I think that that really is the bedrock of what Chavez felt about the oil and about everything else, and I think that that is what forms the bedrock of this new form of socialism that you see throughout Latin America. And
Chavez's passing will punctuate the success of that formula in South America, but I don't think we'll see a return to the days of colonial exploitation. I use the word colonial not in the classic sense, but in the present sense, where corporations control the world, and this is thwarted by individual efforts by people like Chavez and others to make their nations independent economically in a world controlled by corporate interest.
That's right. And, Chavez, one of the other things that Chavez did that is so remarkable is that he took on entrenched power in his own country, powers which had been entrenched literally for centuries. The legacy of colonialism and that upper aristocratic class in Venezuela, which seemed so immutable and so inert. And really, he was able to take power away from them, delegitimize them, and create a state that was far closer to what we traditionally think of as democracy.
Very much so, and of course, still within the mode of representative government, as opposed to the people actually being in power to make legislative decisions. That's one of the legacies that is going to come under assault for Chavez, because it still is representative government, and who knows what manipulations can take place in the future to manipulate the people into accepting tyrants or accepting policies that are not in their best interest. We see this happening in the United States, so a little wonder that it will be a problem in other countries.
That's right, and I think that was one of the things that Chavez and the Chavista movement more generally attempted to embed within the foundations of the new Venezuela. This was something that was built in to the new constitution, something that became sort of this foundation that was institutionalized, and the hope is that it was able to be institutionalized enough that it will persevere well beyond his death.
Yeah, and I think it will. I think it will. People, we say people have short memories, but with what Chavez accomplished in Venezuela, short memories will not dislodge that.
I hope I agree with you, and I hope that is absolutely true. But I do want to turn to other important issues. So before we turn to all of that, I want to just give a little bit of your background to some listeners who might be a little bit unfamiliar with you. You were, of course, a senator from the state of Alaska from 1969 to 1981, and that tenure in Congress, I think you're remembered for many important positions that you took, and perhaps most memorably arguing to end the draft for the Vietnam War and putting the Pentagon Papers into the public record. I mention all of this because I want to get a sense of your formative experiences that brought you into the political arena, and perhaps most significantly, what did you learn about the reality of government while you were there as opposed to the mythology that you were taught?
Well, you put your finger right on it. The reality nowhere measures up to the theory that we have. We call our countries democracies. Well, in point of fact, they're not democracies. They're representative governments. And the success of representative government as we went from tyranny and monarchical systems, it was an easy take to transfer to representative government, because the people who were in power under the earlier structure of government retained their power within representative government. And so we have not seen any fundamental change in human governance since we came out of the Age of Enlightenment. And that's unfortunate, because the central power of government is lawmaking. And whether it's laws made by a king, and of course under the monarchical system, only kings could make laws. The parliaments they had would dispose of those laws in sort of a rubber stamp fashion. But as we see those parliaments develop, we see them develop into what is a full-fledged form of representative government. The reason why the American Constitution was copied so extensively is because it did not disrupt that format. In other words, the people who controlled society at the time were able to turn themselves with the elections into, quote, what we call democracies, and continue to maintain that power. We see that in the United States today, where essentially the country is controlled, owned lock, stock, and barrel by Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, and of course the globalization of the military-industrial complex with NATO, and the fact that global corporations control the world society as we know it. You've heard the cliche, it's terrible, we're going to have a world government, and it's going to be liberal and all of that. Well, we have a world government right now, and it's corporate control of the world economy. There's a study out of Switzerland that indicated that that 60% of the wealth of the world was owned by the interlocking directorate of 1,300 corporations. 60% of the wealth was in the hands of these corporations, which are primarily bankers.
That was my conversation with Mike Gravel in March of 2013. Again, Mike just passed the other day at the age of 91. If you haven't, please do go on YouTube, look up his 2008 presidential debate performance. It is the stuff of legend. It is the reason why all the kids were clamoring for Gravel in 2020. It is the reason why we can remember this man as somebody who took a stand against all of these bastards, every single one of them. Rest in peace, Mike.